Hello. Hope you hear me. Yes. So last session of the day, we had to delay a bit because of something happening in the stand. I'm very happy to be with you this evening on this talk, which is about risk regulation and business opportunity. I'm from PwC. I'm heading risk and regulation in EMEA. I'm Rami Fegali, and I have a fabulous panel with Françoise on my left, which is a scientific advisor of the France AI Hub. You will explain about it later.
France IA, yes,
Okay.
that's it.
In English. Marc Gardet, Deputy CTO of Microsoft France.
Oui.
And Jean-Marie John Matthews, which is a co-founder of Giscard, and you tell us a bit more about Giscard later.
Hello.
So we have two rounds of questions. One is to set the stage and to look what's at stake. What is the risk, what is the regulation of AI, and why are we talking about it? And maybe on the second round, think about a bit the solution, how we can develop a business opportunity while managing risk and regulation, if we can. And then we'll have a couple of Q&A afterwards. So I will start by you, Mark, maybe to set the scene and tell us what are the main AI risk category and framework that exist.
So risk category and framework to address them. But maybe as an introduction propos, I would like to emphasize that probably with the rise of AI and in particular with generative AI and the pace of innovation, we are witnessing probably the most important innovation wave of all time. And it has a potential for human development that is bigger than any invention that came before. But the greater the technology, the greater the potential, the greater the benefits, but also the greater the damage it can causes. And the pace of innovation is not going to slow down. That means that the pace of investment of work to control, to regulate it, need to increase. That's the obvious. Government today are worried, and I will come back on a lot of different initiatives to try to regulate, to control the risk damage caused by AI. Obviously, the government are worried about the potential impact on national security. How AI and generative AI can help to forge more damaging cybersecurity attack. Using phishing, using discovering vulnerability, in forging new viruses. Could be also worry to help biotechnological, or how it could be used to attack critical infrastructure, for example. That's the first category of national security issues. The second one, very important this year, because half of the population is going to vote this calendar year. So the potential of misinformations, deepfake, influencing democratic process, and so on and so forth. The third one is biases. How it can be misused to discrimination, to hurt vulnerable population, and so on and so forth. And there are a lot of new different attack technique in security that came from the inherent nature of AI, and there is a new category of risk coming in particular with generative AI. You may have heard about the METR framework. They have defined the METR Atlas framework. Atlas means adversarial threat landscape for AI system. It's kind of living knowledge base of known attack. It's a collective work of 100 government, research, and big organizations. And recently, Microsoft collaborate with MITRE to add to this knowledge base new attack techniques specifically coming from the potentiality of LLM. That's very important. So, how the government try to address it? There is a lot of different initiatives. Obviously, in Europe, you've all heard about AI Act. I think we'll come back on that. But there is a lot of different initiatives in Canada, in India, in Chinese, to try to have some rules to limit the impact and to govern the risk around AI. You have heard the recent one, executive order by Joe Biden to control the safe, trust, and responsible AI. I encourage you to read. It's very comprehensive risk analysis and measure to be adopted by the government agency to address those risks. Above that country-specific or EU-specific initiative, we have a lot of initiatives driven by OECD, G7, G20. This week there is a Korean UK summit. You have heard about Bletchley Park security summit. You have a lot of different publications that address the same topics. What is the principle of ethic? What can be done to address those issues?
Thank you, Mark. And you mentioned there are a lot of things that are already existing. Maybe you can react to this, Françoise, specifically on AI Act as well, because we are in EU and it has been actually published yesterday or today, I don't remember, but it's now yesterday. Tell us about how do you see it, what the challenge, what the implication, and how it compares with what already exists elsewhere in the world.
Yeah. Basically, the question which has been discussed a lot in the world in the past couple of years has been how should we regulate? How should we control, right? The solution that the Europeans have chosen is to regulate by law. That's a law. If you're not satisfying what I ask from you, you're going to pay, and it's heavy. It's heavy, it's heavy. So that's one thing. So it's very stringent and it's very constraining. Other countries like the US, they basically published the document by Joe Biden, basically tells you, if you're a good guy, you should do that. Please, be nice, right? So it's another approach. And you have the entire spectrum in the different countries going between the very stringent law in Europe to something which is very much open. We believe in Europe that the law is necessary because we want to protect the European market. Clearly, we want to put rules so that the citizen in Europe is protected by our own framework of, let's say, rules about what the world should be. Let's say the Chinese have a very different set of rules. We impose our rules in Europe. So there have been a lot of discussion about these regulations stating that if we, let me be caricatural, in Europe we regulate, in the US they create, right? So it's true that the impact of regulation on innovation can be significant, and we have to take very much care of that. Now, in the previous talk, there was somebody who said, when we have a regulation, we have a framework, and having a framework for a company is very nice because you know what the rule is. You know what the borders are that you should not go through. So I believe that actually regulation is going to be something useful for competition, because you're going to play in a room where the rules of the games are known, and we have to see it this way. So at Up France AI, Up France IA, what we do is basically to help our members, which are companies, startups, etc., all in AI, obviously, help them to prepare for, the thing has been published yesterday, and now we have 2 years to get into shape and get the label. So companies need to have tools to help them, and Giscard is one of these tools which are typically offering such tools. And we are trying to put in place everything which is needed to help companies get prepared. It's going to be an important, significant price, especially for a startup. How can we help that?
Of course. Do you think that the AI Act managed to strike the balance right between being secure and enabling innovation or development, or what's your take on this?
That's a big discussion. Innovation. I've been in innovation for all my life. It's complex. I think again that knowing the rules is better than not knowing it. So if you know the rules, you know what's going to be the framework around you, then you have free room to innovate and invent and create. Now, because innovation is very often in the hand of little companies, startups, these startups, they can probably not foot the bill. And this is why the AI Act include articles which help the SMEs, let's say, by getting special funding, special financing to help them go for it. But knowing is better than not knowing.
Okay, good. So, and you wanted to react, Mark?
Just a quick comment to reinforce what has been said. Obviously, for example, Microsoft reacted to Joe Biden executive order by applying immediately the code of conduct. But we agree that in order to implement the responsibility principle, which is one of the pillars of the responsible AI, you need to be responsible against the law and not just let big companies just self-regulate themselves. So we agree that AI and big companies should be regulated, especially the one providing the more powerful models.
Okay, cool. So you are quite in line with the direction we took in Europe. Jean-Marie, can you tell us a bit about the specific risk of Gen AI? You told me, I think, previously that you're working a lot now on Gen AI, 80% of your time. What does it change in terms of risk?
Yeah, at Giscard we have the chance and the opportunity to check, test different AI models that are developed by industries, by banking fields and many different fields. And what we can say is that we have like 3 different risks of AI model that we try to detect, identify. We have first, I would say, quality issues of AI models. We have many examples of it. For instance, I don't know, let's say you are an insurance company in the HR sector. You want to develop a bot that is able to tell employees how many days off they have, and you just want this chatbot to provide the right answer. And if you don't, actually, you lose trust from your employees. And this is, I would say, the main issue we are facing. So it's mostly called hallucination. And detecting hallucination is hard because it depends on the domain application. So it depends on if it's a HR bot, it depends on your knowledge base. So it can be hard to detect, it can be hard to generate. So this is, I would say, the first issue we face. A second issue is more about cybersecurity. So we know with AI models that are generative, it's really easy to attack them. One of the biggest attacks is prompt injection. So it means you will add some content as input of your AI models, and you try the AI model to be insulting or provide hateful speech. So there are many cases of this, and the big risk is, of course, reputational. So we have plenty of issues where you have an AI model who provide like obscene results, and then it ends up in Twitter, and you have so many people who are really afraid of this kind of reputational risk, and there's a big I would say room in the space of trying to detect this kind of vulnerabilities. And I would say the last thing we try to handle is compliance. So there are so many frameworks that are coming out. ISO 42001, of course, but you also have all the standards that will be used by the AI Act. So the question is how to prepare companies to automate these compliance processes. So how to collect proofs, and yeah, this is a big issue that people and companies are facing. And I would say this is the third big risk that we face at Giscard.
So model performance, security and cybersecurity and compliance, and everything is exacerbated by Gen AI. You want to react, Françoise?
There is one risk that our companies, our members always mention, is the question of data. I don't want my data to be leaked out, right? I don't want to be using a product which is using data which have been scraped off the web irregularly. So the question of the data protection, so to speak, is very important. I don't want my prompt to be leaked to whatever. So the data is a real important issue also.
And for generative, it works. And for generative AI, I would add another risk to what has been already mentioned is IP protections, risk of IP infringement. When you generate content that could be similar to some protected content elsewhere, could generate some risk. So we have taken some measure to address that type of risk.
Is it the same scale at AI, or are we changing scale with Gen AI? Just pure. What do you think?
You mean the quantity of risks?
Yeah.
I think the big difference between AI, well, same between AI and Gen AI, but the issue is that before, the users of AI were typically experts, right? They were trained people, they knew what they were dealing with, they knew what they were doing, so they were kind of understanding what the risks were and were capable of, mitigate them. The big problem or the big thing with generative AI is that everybody's using it. And everybody, meaning people in the street who have no idea, no clue what this thing is doing, and believing that this tool is for real, where it can hallucinate, produce whatever. So this, to me, increases the risk enormously. It's not the same population. So we have to handle that part, which is social, if you want.
Want to react?
Yeah, to me, there's a big difference between traditional machine learning risk and AI and generative AI risk. Because we started at Giscard by traditional machine learning, and mostly we handled biases or issues related to discrimination. So these were the main risks we had, and people asked us to check their AI, the traditional machine learning model, against that. And with generative AI models, we have this new cybersecurity attacks that we see so many times. And when you talk about data leakage, yeah, there are so many people they're afraid of HR bots that will reveal the salary of the CEO because it's linked with the knowledge base, the HR knowledge base. So this kind of issues is really new, and we haven't this before.
A new development life cycle with machine learning operation, you need to introduce new set of tools to be able to map, to measure, and to mitigate and to govern some risk. So, for example, to come back to your risk you mentioned, how to fight against the risk of LLM to generate hateful content, violent content, self-destruction, sexual, etc. The response is use other AI model to classify the prompt and the response and raise alert when the answer is above a certain acceptable threshold. Same for prompt injection. We have control to detect direct and indirect prompt injection, jailbreak or indirect prompt injection. We have protected content that detect that what the code that has been generated or the text content that has been generated is common to a known base of public protected content, recipes, song lyrics, or whatever. So it's a risk. You need to have tools to identify, to map, to measure, to govern the full life cycle.
Yeah, basically, there is a huge question which is not solved. Is the question of benchmark. In machine learning, you have a model, and it's extremely clear how the model is evaluated, how its performance is characterized. In Gen AI, there is not a benchmark which is clearly established, which you can use and know. You have your model, you run your benchmark, and then you know. Below threshold, above threshold, take it, not take it. The benchmark issue, there are plenty of benchmark out there. There is not one benchmark. So this is also an issue. Or stated in other words, if I have a language model, I choose my benchmark to show that it's better than the others, and that's a problem.
So, you want to react as well? Yeah? Go.
No, there is no official recognized benchmark, but when you need to choose, there is a lot of different models out there. On the Just Azure catalog, we have more than 1,600 models. So are you going to choose large model, proprietary model, open source model, small models, whatever? So we provide tools to select, to test, and to benchmark against some very specific measure. Groundiness. This model is better to ground in answer to the context, enriched context that is provided. Fluency, etc., etc. So we're providing a set of measures in order to be able to compare with the same classifier the performance of the different model before using it in production, for example. But I agree, there is no an international well-defined benchmark to measure performance of LLM, for example.
So let's go to the solution part, and we started to discuss about it. And I'll come back to you again, Françoise, and you alluded to it, I think, before. You have been working on the AI Act for some time now, with working group with the France AI Hub. And so what are the outcomes of it? What are the findings you had? And what would be also ahead of us to complete, in your view?
Well, to us, because at the Hub France IA, we stick to our French name, because we have members who come to us to get information, to be able to work with their peers, and to exchange best practices. So we started working on the AI Act when it came out, in April 21, I think it was. Yes, and basically there, what the companies wanted, they wanted to understand what there was in it for them. And usually what it means is that you have to read this document, analyze it, and exchange the way it's done. What was very striking for us at the time, it was in a group with bankers, and typically this guy, regulation, they know that, and they live off that every day. The weird thing is that we were picking an example of an application, let's say credit scoring in a particular setting. This bank would say this is high risk, and this one would say no, it's not.
It's high risk.
It's not. One would say it is, the other one would say it's not, in the particular context. So the first thing we realized is that there was a problem in the AI Act with the very definition of the terms. So that is the people at the Commission who wrote this text, whom we know, were basically legal people. They have no idea what AI is on the field. So what we tried to do with our members was working on the text, expliciting the terms, what were the issues, blah, blah, blah. 2 years after, what we do now, we just started a group which we call BAYA.
In French.
Boussole for the AI Act,
Okay.
Compass for the AI Act. What we think is that the company at this stage don't need to understand the terms. That's wrong, but let's say. What they need is to have assistance which will guide them through the process of getting the compliance ready in 2 years. So we need to be very practical. We take the process of developing a project. When you're thinking of trying to make a project, what is the document, the Excel file, the tool, the whatever that you need to have to go through that and decide, yes, no, I do it. And this you will keep, because in the compliance, in the audit, you will be able to prove that. So what is the succession of different tools, very practical, stupid things that you need to do at each stage to do it, collect it, keep it, so that when you have an audit for compliance, you can just produce that as a proof.
It looks like a burden a bit, no?
What do you say?
It looks like a burden.
It looks like a burden. It is a burden. When you talk to bankers, they say we do probably 80% of that already, but not 100%. So that's the 20% missing. For other domains, it's much harder, I think. Yeah, it is a burden.
Yeah.
Regulators are burdened. Yeah, they're really a pain in the neck.
I know, but we were trying to find a balance between innovation and. So maybe you can comment also, see how you dealt with this in Microsoft.
No, I know the burden, but Microsoft starts this journey to implement a company-wide responsible program more than 8 years ago. So, for example, it started a very first step to create a first committee to inform the leadership team about the risk of AI. This committee was named HITER, Artificial Intelligence Ethics in Engineering and Research. And the first result of this ITER committee was to create our North Star, which were our 6 principles, responsible principle, the classical fairness, etc., etc. But the year after, we created the governance body, the more important cornerstone of our program. It's named ORA, Office of Responsible AI. And the very first step of this governance body was to create our internal standard of responsible AI. To transform the principles, because everybody is principle. It's easy to say, I want to have fairness, to have transparency, responsibility, blah, 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 blah. But how? How you transfer in practical steps for engineering teams to implement this principle. So we publish our first internal standard, which is evolved to a version 2, which finally publish and share with our customer. Then the year after, they created RAISE. Now, how the engineering teams create the process, the tooling, the training for the engineer to practice responsibility every day, etc., etc. And then recently, it was beginning of May, and I encourage you to read this document. It's for you. We have published our first report, transparency report for responsible AI. It shares our experience of this journey. It applies on some key case studies how we apply our rule or standard or governance body, and the more important for you, it shares the set of tools that we have decided to share with you. We have published more than 30 different tools that can be used in implementing a responsibility process. The tools are described in this transparency report. So if you want to say what does it take for a company like Microsoft to go over 8 years over this responsibility journey, I think this responsibility transparency report is a great start.
Thank you.
One thing here which is very critical, you know, when we talk about tool, we are doing this work on tools, but what is very important for us Europeans is that these tools match absolutely one by one to the different articles in the AI Act, because this is going to be the regulation we have. And this work of matching the tools, it has to match, and then what are the holes? What are the stuff in the different articles where you don't have a tool? So this work, I think, can only be done now because the text was published yesterday, basically.
I will come back to you after, but yeah, you can comment, Jean-Marie.
In terms of solution, at Giscard, what we do, we have two dedicated research teams working on that, one on cybersecurity and another one on compliance. I would say to find a solution, we need to mix a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. The top-down approach is starting by a framework. So for instance, for cybersecurity, you have so many frameworks. OWASP telling, okay, you have a taxonomy saying you have data leakage, you have toxicity, you have hateful speech, and so on. And you start by this taxonomy, and then you try to find some specificity from the domain application. So you try to pick your knowledge base and find the small details that could adapt these taxonomies and find this right balance between a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And this is the same for compliance. You need to start by a guideline or something, a toolkit, or even a checklist that you can have from the EU AI Act, for instance, and then try to use all the proofs that you can have in your projects. So it can be in your code, it can be in your documentation, and find the right balance. So it's just about having the right balance between bottom-up and top-down. This is the solution for us.
You have developed some solution, Jean-Marie, and they have some automation embedded, and I think that was something also important as well. Can you tell us maybe a bit why you went this route, and why did you do this basically?
To me, automation is the key. Why? For two reasons. First, we know it's a burden, as you said. Regulation. Nobody likes regulation. So if you want regulation to be a bit easier, you need to automate and make it faster. And second, you are talking to I would say a specific people, who are data scientists actually, and data scientist practitioners. They like when compliance can be tech-driven actually. So it can talk the same way they talk. So talking about automation, integration, this is the kind of thing they like. And for having a compliance process that is successful, you need to involve all the stakeholders and especially technical people. So this is why I think automation is the right direction for compliance.
Let me summarize. Doing it with a tool is fun because making it by hand is a pain in the neck.
Good, thank you. That's a good summary. Thank you. Do you have some question? I think it's time. Anyone? Mark, you wanted to react, and then earlier on, I'll give you the opportunity.
The alignment of the tools, the process need to be aligned. Our internal methodology I just mentioned is aligned with the NIST RMF, ISO 42001, some other frameworks. So it's a moving target. We have adapted, for example, with LLM. We created before generative AI, and we've adapted our responsibility standard to integrate the new risk and the new challenge raised by LLM, for example. So it's a living process.
What's maybe a final question for you three? What's your take? I mean, we discussed the risk, and obviously there are some risk, the regulation, which creates against risk in itself. You mentioned that there are actually a lot of solutions out there, either automation, framework, etc. Where do we stand on this? Do we have enough solution to manage the risk we have, and it's then a question of implementation, or is this something ahead of us which is a bit danger?
To me, when we talk with our members, the first issue is that they're not aware of the risk. So they need to be aware of the risk, number one. Number two, they need to be aware of methods by which they can measure the impact. They usually don't have, bankers have, but usually they don't have. So knowing the risk, being able to measure them is important, and then they need to put in place some mechanism by which they can control this risk. I think the AI Act is a good way of doing this, but for them, again, we need to have a tool, because doing that by hand is just too expensive and too painful.
Yes, I agree with that. Risk management culture, and then a governance. Because it's easy to have tools, but if you don't have the right process, the right training, the right risk management framework, it's going to be a failure.
Okay. Last thing, maybe, automation is not the panacea of all the problems. It's really important to know it's more about finding a right balance between a human process that is helped by toolings. So this is the right balance also, yeah.
Well, but maybe thank you. I will conclude on this, because then we talk actually about the human element. So in terms of control, in terms of skills, in terms of being able to implement it, and it's both risk management culture. You mentioned, and I think you illustrated quite well, much more than what I would do, but also specific skills on the domain, which is important. And again, I think this is we have ahead of us. I mean, to be able to deserve actually what the promises for AI. For you.
Even, for example, a last example to illustrate the need to have people from the business in the teams. If you want to identify risk by using, for example, a classical red teaming approach, you need to have expert of adversarial attack, but you need to have a genuine business user that can, because they are going to interact with user language, with human language. So it's important to have business people in the risk assessment and the risk discovery process.
May I say that risk number
Final
one
word.
in AI, risk number one is not having a business person, not taking care of the needs.
So that's a good conclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you.